Everyone thought they knew what the headline would be. A historic sack record, a meaningless late-season win, another chapter in a frustrating year for the Cleveland Browns. That's what most people tuned in expecting, and on the surface, that's exactly what happened. But the moment that actually changed everything didn't show up in the box score. It didn't happen during the play that made history. It didn't happen when the crowd exploded. And it didn't happen when the cameras followed the celebration. It happened after the game, when a franchise cornerstone said something he didn't need to say. Because when Myles Garrett spoke about what he just witnessed, his words carried more weight than the record itself. This wasn't hype. This wasn't emotion. This was trust. The kind that only forms when something real is happening behind the scenes. For years, Cleveland has been searching for that moment, one where belief inside the building finally matches the hope outside it. Fans have heard promises before. They've seen flashes before, but this felt different. And it's centered around someone most people weren't even talking about heading into the game. A rookie quarterback. A late-game situation. Everything on the line. When Shedeur stepped into that moment, the outcome mattered, but the reaction afterward mattered more. Because veterans don't hand out confidence lightly. Defensive leaders don't publicly endorse quarterbacks unless they're sure. That's what made this hit differently. It wasn't about declaring a new era. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about a quiet realization spreading through the locker room. Something had shifted. And once you understand why Garrett said what he said, and what Sanders revealed afterward, you start to see this game for what it really was. Not just a win, not just a record, but the beginning of a belief Cleveland has been chasing for a long time. For weeks, the entire league had its eyes locked on one number, and everyone knew who it belonged to. Myles Garrett was sitting on the edge of history, just half a sack away from breaking a record that had survived generations of elite pass rushers. And once he got that close, the NFL responded the only way it knows how. They tried to erase him. Every offense that lined up against the Cleveland Browns built their entire game plan around one goal. Don't let Garrett touch the quarterback. Slide protections, double teams, tight ends chipping before releasing, running backs staying home instead of leaking out, quick throws designed to get the ball out before Garrett could even take a second step. It wasn't subtle, it was survival. And for 3 straight weeks, it worked just enough to keep history out of reach. That's what made the pressure heavier with every passing snap. Not because Garrett wasn't winning his matchups, but because he was being denied the opportunity to finish them. He was collapsing pockets, forcing rushed throws, changing play calls, but the stat that mattered stayed frozen. By the time the season finale arrived, the tension was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a record anymore. It was about legacy, about whether one of the most dominant defensive players of his era would be remembered with an asterisk, almost. From the opening drive, Cincinnati made their intentions clear. Wherever Garrett lined up, help followed. The moment he shifted inside, bodies collapsed. The moment he widened out, protection slid his way. The Bengals weren't trying to win pretty, they were trying to avoid being remembered forever. For 3 quarters, they succeeded. Snap after snap passed without the moment arriving. You could feel the weight building, not panic, but focus. The kind of locked-in intensity that only shows up when a player knows the window might close forever. And here's what made this chase even more insane. Garrett wasn't racking up sacks on a dominant team with constant late-game passing situations. He was doing this on a team with one of the league's worst offenses. Fewer leads, fewer obvious pass attempts, fewer chances than almost any record-chasing defender before him. Which meant when the opportunity finally came, it had to count. And that's what made what happened next feel inevitable. Because when greatness is denied long enough, it doesn't disappear. It waits. And the league gave Garrett one moment, just one, to remind everyone who he is. For most of the afternoon, Cincinnati executed the perfect plan. They didn't try to outplay greatness, they tried to avoid it. Every snap was designed with one priority in mind: keep Myles Garrett from deciding the game on his own. Protection slid his way. Help arrived early. If there was even a hint of risk, the ball was gone before the play could breathe. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't aggressive. It was disciplined. And for 3 quarters, it worked. Garrett was still impacting the game, collapsing pockets, forcing rushed decisions, but the moment everyone was waiting for stayed locked away. The sack total didn't move. The record stayed just out of reach. With every snap that passed, the tension grew heavier. Then the fourth quarter arrived. Late in the game, with the clock tightening and the margin for error shrinking, Cincinnati blinked. Not because of arrogance, not because of poor preparation, just fatigue. One lapse, one snap where communication wasn't perfect. And against a player like Garrett, that's all it takes. On that play, the Bengals left him in a one-on-one matchup. No chip, no slide, no safety net. For the first time all afternoon, Garrett saw clean space in front of him. He didn't hesitate. He exploded off the edge with violent speed, bent around the tackle, and closed in before Joe Burrow had a chance to reset. The pocket collapsed instantly. The whistle blew, and history was sealed. Sack number 23. The stadium erupted in a way that felt different, louder, deeper, emotional. Teammates poured onto the field from every direction. Defensive players, offensive players, coaches. Everyone understood exactly what had just happened. This wasn't just a sack. It was the moment the league finally ran out of answers. What made it even more remarkable was the context. This wasn't a record padded by blowouts or late-game stat chasing. Garrett earned it with fewer opportunities than almost anyone before him. Opponents didn't need to throw often because Cleveland rarely played from ahead. And yet, when the moment finally arrived, Garrett didn't need multiple chances. He needed one. That's the difference between great players and legends. Great players need repetition. Legends need opportunity, and when it shows up, they finish. But as massive as that moment was, it didn't end the story. Because while the crowd was still roaring and the record books were being rewritten, the game itself wasn't over yet. And the pressure was about to land on someone else entirely. And just when the stadium was still buzzing from history being made, reality hit hard. The celebration had to stop. The record didn't end the game. And suddenly, all the pressure shifted in one direction, straight onto the shoulders of a rookie quarterback. The Cleveland Browns were still trailing. The season finale was slipping away. And now the responsibility of closing it out didn't fall on the defense, or the coaching staff, or the veteran leaders. It fell on Shedeur Sanders. This wasn't a comfortable situation. There was no lead to protect, no safe script to lean on, no margin for error. One mistake here doesn't just cost a game, it changes how an entire season is remembered. And that's what made this moment so dangerous. All year long, Sanders had been under a microscope. Every throw questioned, every facial expression dissected. Rumors had followed him for weeks, speculation about whether the organization truly believed in him, whispers about future plans, quiet doubts about whether he was the long-term answer. None of it confirmed, but loud enough to feel. Now all of that noise was packed into one drive. This is where young quarterbacks usually crack. The speed ramps up, decisions get rushed, mechanics fall apart. You start seeing panic, forced throws, unnecessary risks, hesitation that kills drives before they even start. But Sanders didn't look rattled. There was no frantic energy, no visible doubt, no sense that the moment was too big. Instead, there was a calm that stood out, the kind that either comes from deep confidence or a refusal to let fear take over. Every snap carried weight. Every read mattered. The defense had just handed him a chance to finish the job, and now the entire stadium was watching to see what he'd do with it. This wasn't about stats anymore. It wasn't about potential. It wasn't even about proving critics wrong. It was about survival. Because moments like this don't care how talented you are. They expose who you are under pressure. And for Sanders, this wasn't a moment he asked for. It was a moment he was forced into. And what he did next would quietly reshape how that locker room viewed him, and whether this season would end in frustration or belief. This was the drive where everything people thought they knew got tested. No momentum carried over from the sack, no emotional boost from the crowd, just the ball in the hands of Shedeur Sanders with the game still hanging in the balance. The Browns didn't need hero ball. They didn't need chaos. They needed control. And that's exactly what they got. From the first snap, something felt different. Sanders wasn't rushing. He wasn't forcing throws to make a statement. He took what the defense gave him and moved on. Short completions, clean reads, subtle pocket movement to buy just enough time. Every decision felt intentional. That's what stood out. Third downs came quickly and each one carried weight. This is where young quarterbacks usually press, where mechanics slip and panic shows up. But Sanders stayed steady. He trusted his progressions. He trusted his protection just enough. And most importantly, he trusted himself. The drive didn't explode down the field. It tightened the game instead. Each completion drained belief from the other sideline. Each conversion made the defense hesitate just a little more. Cincinnati knew what was happening, but stopping it meant risking a breakdown, and Sanders exploited that hesitation perfectly. What made this drive dangerous wasn't arm strength or creativity. It was composure. Sanders looked like someone who had already been in this moment, even though he hadn't. No visible nerves, no emotional swings, just calm execution under pressure. That's not common for a rookie. That's learned behavior showing up at the right time. As the Browns crossed midfield, the tension shifted. The crowd quieted. The defense tightened. Everyone understood the math. Field goal range wasn't hypothetical anymore, it was approaching fast. And when the offense finally put Dustin Hopkins in position, the moment felt almost inevitable. The kick went straight through. Game over. But here's the part that mattered most. Sanders didn't win that drive with desperation. He didn't rely on broken plays or last-second miracles. He won it with patience, discipline, and trust in preparation. That's the kind of drive that changes how teammates talk about you. And while fans celebrated the scoreboard, something else was happening on the sideline. A defensive legend was watching closely, not the result, but the process. And what he said next is why this drive will be remembered long after the final score. The noise hadn't even died down yet when it happened, and that's what made it so powerful. This wasn't a carefully prepared statement. It wasn't a media-trained answer. It was a reaction. And coming from the person who said it, that reaction carried more weight than any stat line ever could. When Myles Garrett was asked about the final drive, about watching the rookie quarterback calmly march the team into position to win, his response was simple. I knew he was going to seal it. That was it. No build-up, no exaggeration, no hesitation. And that's why the room shifted. Garrett didn't say he hoped it would work. He didn't say he believed it might. He said he knew. That word matters, especially coming from someone who has seen everything this franchise has gone through, the false starts, the broken plans, the quarterbacks who never lasted. This is a player who just made history, a defensive superstar who didn't need to say anything at all. Yet instead of talking about his own moment, he redirected the spotlight toward the rookie who finished the job. That tells you everything. Garrett explained that once the offense reached field goal range, there was no doubt in his mind. Not about the kick, not about the moment, not about the quarterback leading it. He spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had already accepted the outcome before it happened. Then he added something even heavier. He said he was proud of him. That's not casual praise, that's endorsement. When a locker room leader says he's proud of a rookie quarterback, it's not about one drive. It's about what he's seen all season in practice, in meetings, in adversity. It's about trust that's been built quietly, long before the cameras caught up. This was Garrett passing out compliments. This was a torch being acknowledged. And the most telling part, he didn't sound surprised. He sounded like this was expected. Like the moment didn't reveal something new, it confirmed something that was already known inside the building. That the rookie could handle pressure. That he wouldn't flinch when everything tightened. That when it mattered most, he'd deliver. That's why this quote landed the way it did. Because when belief comes from someone like Garrett, it doesn't feel like hype. It feels like validation. And once that validation was out in the open, Sanders' own words suddenly mattered even more, because they explained how he got there in the first place. What came out afterward surprised a lot of people, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. When Shedeur Sanders was asked about that final drive, he didn't start with X's and O's. He didn't talk about coverage looks or protections. He went somewhere much deeper. He admitted the week leading up to the game had been heavy. According to Sanders, he'd been dealing with internal battles mentally and spiritually, the kind that don't show up on film but affect everything. He said his body language felt off. His energy wasn't right, and he knew it in real time. That matters because fans often assume struggles come from mechanics or talent. Sometimes it's something quieter and harder. Sanders didn't frame this as an excuse. He framed it as awareness. He talked about how pressure stacks when you're a rookie, when every mistake gets magnified, and when outside voices never stop talking. Reports and online buzz had been swirling for weeks as speculation about his future, questions about belief inside the organization, constant evaluation. None of it confirmed, but all of it loud enough to feel. That kind of noise wears on players more than people realize. He described it as fighting battles that weren't about football at all. Confidence, identity, staying grounded when things feel unstable. Those are challenges veterans still struggle with, and he was facing them in his first season. The turning point came at halftime. Sanders said close teammates pulled him aside. Not coaches, not speeches, players. The ones who see everything up close. They reminded him who he was. They told him this version of himself, tense, closed off, carrying weight, wasn't real. That moment mattered. Because great locker rooms don't let their quarterback spiral internally. They intervene. They stabilize. They speak truth when someone starts drifting. After halftime, Sanders said things clicked again. Not instantly, not perfectly, but mentally something shifted. He described it as winning battles that had nothing to do with arm strength or play calls, winning inside his head. And that explains why the final drive looked the way it did. Not rushed, not frantic, controlled. When you understand that context, Cleveland Browns winning that game wasn't just about execution. It was about resilience, about leaning on people, about not letting quiet struggles dictate loud moments. And that's why this part of the story matters. Because talent gets you opportunities, but handling battles no one sees. That's what determines who lasts. What made this moment linger wasn't just what happened on the field. It was who shared it. On one side stood Myles Garrett, the established cornerstone, the player who has carried the identity of the Cleveland Browns through years of frustration, false starts, and seasons where belief was hard to find. A defensive leader who had already given the franchise everything it could reasonably ask for, and then gave more. On the other side stood Shedeur Sanders, still early in his journey, still learning how to navigate pressure, criticism, and expectations that never stop. still absorbing the weight that comes with being young, visible, and constantly evaluated. And for one game, those two timelines crossed. Garrett's record-breaking moment could have easily been the headline and the ending, a historic achievement, a personal legacy sealed, but instead it became the backdrop, the setup, the stage for something quieter and arguably more important. Because when a player like Garrett publicly puts his trust in a rookie quarterback, it doesn't happen on impulse. It's not about one drive. It's about what's been seen when cameras aren't rolling, how someone responds after mistakes, how they carry themselves when things aren't working, how they handle pressure without deflecting it. That's why this felt different. It wasn't a coronation. It wasn't a guarantee. It was alignment. Defense and offense, present and future, leadership meeting growth in the same moment. That doesn't mean everything is suddenly fixed. It doesn't mean the Browns are done building. Development isn't linear, and seasons don't follow scripts. But moments like this create something Cleveland hasn't always had: internal belief that's shared, not forced. And belief changes behavior. It changes how teammates respond. It changes how leadership plans. It changes how adversity is handled next time. For years, Browns fans have been promised futures that never arrived. This didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a signal, subtle, grounded, and earned. Two cornerstones, standing on different ends of their careers, recognizing each other in the same moment. That doesn't guarantee success, but it does point the franchise in a direction. And sometimes, direction is exactly where a new era quietly begins.